Welcome to the Manitoba Ag Days podcast, featuring speakers from our 2017 event. This podcast features Scott Day from Tree Lane Farms Limited, and his talk is called From the Souris Valley to the Silicon Valley.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Ray-Jean said, that I was with Manitoba Agriculture for a long time, and actually almost all those years I was involved with Ag Days. And my very first year was looking after the slide projector at the program session. So that was back in 1989. I have a close affinity for the show, and I really feel honored to be back here and see what a great job the committee's been doing with the show after I moved on. So as it says, from Souris Valley to Silicon Valley, and I want to recognize my family first. This has been a big part of my ability to gallivant around the world and around North America. And the only way this works is if I can phone my dad from the beach in California and tell him to load that truckload of canola and not feel any guilt or remorse about doing that. That's how this works. So I want to recognize my dad and my parents for supporting me. And they're sitting up there, so they're waving and being a part of this as well. I think I got a couple things going on here. We're good now. So, and also Ann and Alex, they were they gave up their lives to move to California. Alex actually missed her last 2 years of high school because she couldn't go to high school in California because she was enrolled in Manitoba, so we kind of cheated it out of her high school years. But she's going to school in New Zealand now, so I think she's going to make up for it pretty fast. So the way this all started for me, I wasn't looking for a career change or anything like that, but Clay Mitchell here and I were asked to speak across Australia in 2006 as the guest of the No-Till Farmer Associations in Australia. Clay was being billed as the Harvard graduate with the biomedical engineering degree, the most technologically advanced farmer in the world, and I was being billed as a farmer from Canada. And we ended up spending a month together. We became friends and stayed in touch. Then 2011 rolls around, and I think most of you will remember we didn't get anything seeded, and the research farm that I was managing at Melita, we hardly got any of our plots seeded. And on this day, when we got the plot seeders stuck, Clay gave me a phone call, and he said, can you fly to Silicon Valley tomorrow? I have an idea. And I wasn't going to be doing much for the rest of the year with all our equipment stuck and our plots wrecked. So I did make a commitment, took a leave of absence from the government, and we drove down to San Francisco in the fall of 2011. And this is what it's like in San Francisco. This was a few weeks after arriving. Dad sees this picture and he says, how are you going to keep the boy down on the farm when he sees the big sights of the city? And this is part of the fun of San Francisco. This is Rocky Horror Picture Show at the Castro. Sometimes some of the relatives came down and visited us in San Francisco, and we had a good time entertaining friends and family. But this is really a slide that points out that San Francisco's number one business is tourism. The number two business is tech. So where we live is close to the Google campus, Apple, Facebook, and so on. That's all occurring right around where we're living, south of San Francisco, in between San Jose and San Francisco. And the number three business is finance, is money. And this is part of the reason we're in San Francisco. One thing about California, I'm going to talk a little bit about California here, is that it's certainly a laid-back area, but it's also a very uptight area. So you have to have everything organic or it's bad. So you have organic dry cleaners, which when you read about it, really doesn't mean anything. You have organic daycare, you have organic dog sitting things, everything's organic. And you have virtually every room or building you go into that's public says that building will cause you cancer or birth defects. You're in an elevator, there's a sign that says that. That's just California for you right now. With that kind of paranoia comes the fact that their food interests are getting almost, silly. So these are lentils, probably from Saskatchewan. They're milk-free, gluten-free, soy-free, nut-free, But they got lots of salt, but because the salt came from the Himalayas and it's pink, it's good for you, right? That's a $10 bag of chips that taste terrible. But, because it's got all these things on it, it's good for you, or it's supposed to be better for you. I won't dwell on this too much, but we arrived in California this year. We were driving down from Vancouver on the day of the election. And so we saw no signs for Hillary, a few signs for Trump, and then this big banner telling everyone in San Francisco to stroke out both names and write in Bernie Sanders. I get to the office, I said, it's a little weird. There's no signs, I think he could win. And they were like making fun of me, and of course by the end of the day, there was a different scenario happening in America. The next day, I flew to Kentucky and Tennessee, and I could write a book on my experiences the day after the election in rural America, but I won't get into that too much. The one thing I will share is I was with a real estate agent in Nebraska a few weeks before the election, and we'd had a lot of kind of interesting, in-depth discussions. And this guy says to me, "What do you think of our election, being an outsider?" And I'm like, okay, I know this guy pretty good. And I kind of unloaded on, are you guys insane? And kind of went off. And I finished my rant, and he says, you're probably right, Scott, but if Donald's son ran, I'd vote for him for sure. And I thought, I just wasted my rant on this situation. I don't talk politics anymore down there. This was one of the signs that were greeting us when we got to our house. Various companies were promoting moving to Canada. That was legitimate the day of the election. These websites all crashed that night. And I will mention that I'm in the United States working as an agronomist because of the North American Free Trade Agreement. So we will keep an eye on that. Anybody who's an agronomist that wants to work in the US, it is a $60 fee for 3 years, and you get to cross the border as much as you want. So it's very convenient for those of us working in agronomy or agriculture to work on both sides of the border because of the free trade agreement. So getting forward to the company itself, it's called Fall Line Capital. Fall line is a term used in skiing. I'll explain that in a second. That's the fastest, most efficient path down a hill. We were founded in 2011. 4 of us were involved in the founding of the company. We have a long-term institutional capital base, which means we have some of the endowment funds of the major universities have given us a significant amount of money to do as we said we were going to do. They don't have any impact on how we spend it. They don't tell us which farms to buy or what tech to buy. It's our money to spend on their behalf. It's different than any other land investment company in that we have no time frame with our money. Virtually all other investment companies have a 10-year time frame in which they can own properties or own assets, and then they have to be sold so those investors can get their money. Ours is not like that at all. We can actually own the farms for 100 years if we wanted to. We focus on U.S. commodity row crop farmland. We don't invest in orchards or vineyards or anything. And because we're a real estate investment trust, we cannot invest outside of the United States. There's a few people that have asked me today about buying their farms, and we can't, by law, invest outside the United States. But we can invest in ag technologies outside the United States, and we've been spending time with Canadian companies over that. And that's the point here, we invest in ag technologies. We create value, hopefully, on the farms that we purchase because of our background in agriculture. We do an extensive diligence before we purchase any property. We have to work with local farmers because of this real estate investment trust that's our structure. We cannot operate the farms ourselves. We have to work with local farmers to operate the farms, but we do get involved with the management as much as we can, helping them with inputs, seeding choices, marketing contracts, and so on. And we're very willing to do any major capital improvements as soon as we own a farm, such as building irrigation, this sort of thing. So here's our team. Here's Clay a few years later. Clay and Eric went to Harvard together, and Eric was in ag tech finance. So he owned companies, finance companies that makes the iPhone, that makes the digital age possible. and he decided to do something different, to own his own company. So he's our CEO. He's from San Francisco. That's the other reason we're based there. It doesn't make a lot of sense that a farmland company is based in San Francisco, but when you go down the list of the dozens and dozens of farmland investment companies, there's at least 10 of them that are based in San Francisco. So Pepo on the right side or left side is from Argentina. Baptiste is from France. They're both 30 years old. They're phenomenal agronomists. They're the guys that I work with. Mike was in farmland acquisition for 30 years, so he's the wise one with the group. I'm the goofy one with the bad hair because I was looking for aphids in the soybeans just before we took the photo. And so I work with these guys on the end most of the time. We actually have 6 more staff now. We've expanded fairly rapidly recently, and they support the work that we do. So just to repeat once again, because it is sometimes a little confusing, we're a private equity firm focused on the acquisition and active management of U.S. cropland. We invest in technology companies that support what we're doing on the land, and we leverage our background in farming and agronomy to try and add more value to these farms. So the ag technology is a small component of the fund. Our main focus is on farmland, but you'll see where some of the ag technology is pretty cool too as well. So looking at farmland investment trends, to be honest, I don't know what's going on in Canada. I don't pay attention to farmland investment in Canada, but in the US, since 2010 to 2015, the amount of farmland owned by institutions like ourselves has gone up 3-fold. 2016, we don't have the data, but it would be an even bigger jump from what I can see. Farmland investment, though, as it's increased dramatically in the last 5 years by institutions, value, is approaching $2.5 trillion. Institutional investment still only represents less than 2% of farmland ownership in the US. You're looking at, this is investment in ag technologies, and it's done the same thing as farmland. You're looking at a 3-fold increase in investment in ag technologies over the same 5 years. Silicon Valley is paying a huge amount of attention to what's going on in technology and agriculture, and a lot of this is coming from Monsanto buying Climate Corp for $1 billion and Precision Plant for that amount of money, and then many other smaller deals. So we have strong fundamentals. Despite the poor commodity prices right now, who knows what they're going to do in the future? We do know that these fundamentals are in place, that we're going to have this population hit 9 or 10 billion people in 2050. So is that 69% more calories? There's hundreds of different variations of this chart. But what I was thinking about this morning is that 2050 seems like a long time away. But there's some of you that went to university with me, and that was 30 years ago, and that went by in a flash. This next 30 years could go by even quicker, and we get to this point and need to produce a significant amount more food. This is from my friends at the UN, and this is showing all the different problems with ag production around the world. Loss of land, deforestation, loss of water. These are fundamentals making food production go the other way. And so the underlying fact here is there's strong fundamentals in the long term. This is an interesting slide that hopefully you can see. This is groundwater stress. So of the major aquifers in the world, this represents the actual size of the aquifer, and this represents the amount of land that's being irrigated from that aquifer. So any of the blue areas are pretty good, but you've got the high plains in Kansas, the Ogallala, western Mexico, north upper Ganges. These places are going backwards in a hurry. I've looked at a farm in Arizona. The guy wanted $25 million for his farm. The water was dropping at 8 feet a year. His water use was 3 feet a year. His water table was dropping 8 feet a year. And he said, you have enough water for 20 years, and then the farm would be useless. And I said, well, how do you justify that fee? He says, you're going to make a lot of money because it produces phenomenally. It's like paying all your rent up front and in 20 years walking away from the farm. There's a farm in North Texas right now in the Panhandle, $177 million, went on the market on Friday. It's probably worth 1/4 of that because the water is dropping 3 feet per year under that farm. There's a woman in West Nebraska had her farm for sale. We talked to her a bit. She wanted $100 million for this farm. She put it to auction on December 1st. It went for $37 million. There was 50 parcels, and she declined 29 of the bids. So that meant that those were her bids. So the $100 million she wanted 2 years before, she gets 37 at the auction. It's probably more likely that it's around $20 million now because of water resources dropping. Anything west of the Mississippi, we become very careful when it comes to the water resource. And this slide is why all this attention. You have, since 94 to 2013, Treasury bills, commodities, Standard & Poor's 500, forestry, gold, U.S. farmland, and I had British farmland in here because this presentation was for a British audience a few months ago, has been the highest returner on an annual basis with one of the lower volatilities aspects as well. So we don't really think of it that way as far as, we get a 3% return or a 4% return on grainland, which would be great, but the appreciation of farmland, when you put that in, you're looking at a 12, 13% return over 20 years on some of this farmland. All these companies that are investing in farmland now, they know the situation's not good. They know the commodities prices and the forecast and that sort of thing, but they haven't invested before, and they want to invest now. What are they going to do? Well, farmland is a real asset. And to them, especially these long-term investors, they know it's not going to go to zero. And they have invested in a lot of projects and investments that did go to zero. And even though the short-term return on farmland is not exciting, we still have a lot of interest from these institutions, these investors, because this is a real asset. And I put in Uber and Airbnb because a couple of years ago, now I think most of you will know, Uber is the app that allows you to share a ride. Airbnb is the app that allows you to share a bedroom or share a house. And they had a market valuation at one point that was over $100 billion. And at that time, nobody knew where they were. They didn't even know what building they were in or who their people were. At the same time, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler had a market valuation that was more established, that was less than Uber and Airbnb put together. So if you have investors putting huge amount of money into this ether thing that's an app on your phone, they need to balance that with something that's real, that's not going to go to zero. And this was some of the dramatic things that were happening in the investment world a couple of years ago. So these are farms that we actually own. This is an irrigation system we put in Montana. This is leveling fields in Arkansas. This is tile drainage we're putting in Wisconsin. So I wanted to emphasize some of the things that is considerably different between the United States and Western Canada. Most states, very few states restrict institutional ownership. Only North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, and Oklahoma are states that we can't buy in. We can buy anywhere else. There's several land investment and management companies in the United States, many, many of these. There's many companies that buy farms on behalf of wealthy individuals. Hancock, for instance, buys farms for doctors and lawyers, and there'll be a doctor in New York that owns a property in Wyoming because that's what that company does. There's very large farm management companies and very large farms in the United States. You just heard me talk about these expensive farms. There's a lot of them. There's two farm management companies in particular that each manage about between 5,000 and 6,000 farms. And what they do is they're owned by some wealthy individual, and this company manages that farm on behalf of the individual. And this is certainly a different environment than what we see in Western Canada. U.S. credit can come from anywhere. A lot of farmers show up at an auction and negotiate credit terms with the auctioneer to buy the land, or a life insurance company, or the real estate agent themselves will finance. There's just access to credit everywhere, and that's sometimes the problem that you're seeing. Farm programs still influence values and decisions on properties in the United States. Of course, that doesn't happen in Canada. Agri-stability doesn't influence what we do on a day-to-day basis, whereas in the United States, this is still a significant part of farmland values. Like, how much is that corn base on that property, or that cotton base? That all figures into your valuation. And then there's farmland that's owned by public entities. We put an offer on a farm today that was owned by a hospital, and that hospital had that farm running to pay for the poor that couldn't afford insurance. So they have a wing of the hospital that's run for people that don't have insurance from the income from a farm. And they've decided that they're going to buy or build 2 drugstores and make more money, so they're going to sell the farm. You run into the Natural Resources Department of states buying land and running schools with them. Jails have farms that are looking to sell. There's just a lot of different aspects of the American system that is not translatable to what we have in Western Canada. One thing, some points to make out, to be clear about with Manitoba, is there is a massive amount of money looking to invest. This is sometimes hard to comprehend. And outside investors know about the prairies. We often get farms sent to us from Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Alberta saying, hey, here's a good opportunity. Anybody that's in farmland investment knows the 3 prairie provinces. Now, we have rules that prohibit that sort of investment, but I want you to know, from the sake of how the world looks at this thing, that they're looking at the prairies as a good potential investment. Some investment companies have unique motivations. That's a bit of a euphemism because they are, we're looking at the standpoint of being, trying to improve the asset, take care of the land. There are at least 2 companies I know of that buy farmland and then take a kickback from the owner to look like they get a good return, and then they get more money from the marketplace. That is not good for establishing values or long-term sustainability in your community. And then some investors see farmland as a place to spend money fast. If you're in another country, my partners from Argentina, they don't put money in the banks today, even though things have stabilized. And a lot of their people from Argentina have bought farmland in the United States simply because it's a safer place to put money than investing it in Argentina. Of course, Southeast Asia is the same way. So here's some of our farm stats. I'm not going to get into the amount of acres because it changes all the time, but we have 4 main regions we work in. Annual crops, we work in no permanent horticultural crops. We had every one of our investors wanted to invest in organic production, and we said that's not our specialty. We are in soil conservation, and once you gave them 15 minutes of what soil conservation is about, they were kind of, the lights turned on. They're like, okay, we want to go with you guys. And so we are converting 1 farm to organic in Washington State, but for the most part, we try and stay away from that. Local farmers, we work in crop share, flex, cash rents, whatever's appropriate in the local region, that's what we try and do. If we have a signed purchase agreement with you as an owner, it will be 30 to 45 days, and we will give you the money. Because we need to do a survey, we need to do a phase 1, we need to have it appraised. These sort of things are part of our diligence. And then, you know, we pay out the full amount of whatever the farm is at the end of the 30 days or 45 days. So this is the 4 regions we're currently working in. I've been in 36 different states, including New York, looking at farms, but this is where we've focused on lately. And we've been up and down the East Coast a bit lately, but these are the 4 areas we're focusing on now. Our diligence, we consider it the highest quality diligence of any of the investment companies. We have our own Giddings probe that doesn't get everywhere, but we look at all the different local aspects, quality of tenants, soil quality, and all that stuff when we build a farm. This is me soil testing in Oregon Washington State. I'm brought out to soil test when the ground's frozen because I'm a bigger guy than everybody else. This farm here we bought in northern Montana for 3% the value of that farm. So this is why we don't get hung up on acres or anything like that. This farm provides a higher return on investment than this farm does, but it's 3% the value. This farm is in, I'm showing pictures of me soil testing just to make it look like I'm doing lots, but we have other people that do this more now, and I don't get out in the field as much. But I'm going to tell a little story here because this is the first farm we purchased in Arkansas, so I flew down there late at night, didn't have a soil probe. I go to Walmart at 2 in the morning in Greenville, Mississippi, looking for a shovel. And if you've ever seen the People of Walmart thing, you know, I actually kind of feel sorry for those people, but I was immersed in that People of Walmart scenario when I was there at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning. There was a guy in a bathrobe buying a towel. And all I could think of was that he was having a shower, got out of the shower, realized he didn't have a towel, so he drove down to Walmart to get a towel. And so I can't find a shovel. There's like 24 people in the lineup. I go to the teller and ask the teller, where's the shovel? And she looks at me and then looks at everybody in the line, and everyone's looking at me like, shovel? What the hell you want to buy a shovel for? There's never been a shovel in this town. Are you burying somebody out there in the swamp? And everybody looked at me in judgment like I was buying a shovel to bury somebody in the swamp. But there's these local things that are always kind of funny to get your head around. So we have a whole bunch of data sources that make the job easier, and many of these things aren't available in the United States. Excuse me. So the USDA has a web service that allows you, wherever your phone is, it tells you all the soil qualities under that phone. So when you land in an airport, you often find that the best soil in the region is underneath that airstrip. Surety soil maps that have some opportunities in Western Canada, but aren't as complete as they are in the U.S. The U.S. Geological Survey Service, monitoring wells, topography. We get the FEMA maps. We get a hunter's app that we pay $15 for, and it tells you the ownership of every acre in the United States. And it's for hunters, so they know who to ask to hunt. But for us, it's pretty cool. And we can actually find out if that person owns land in other states. Wherever we're standing, we know who owns the land because of this app that is for hunters. Every one of these things is layered on Google Earth, and we can find it out on our phone in about 10 seconds. And so we often know more about a farm than a real estate agent does, as long as we got the borders for it. This is a surety map of a farm we have in northern Montana, and it's just, we can color code it in whichever way we want in relation to, is it class 1, class 2, irrigation, flood, and so on. It just makes evaluating a farm very fast. This is that soil web service thing that you can put on your phone, tells you, you can't really see it, tells percentage of clay, it'll tell you the salinity, sodium absorption ratio of anything you're standing above, anywhere in the United States. So I'll quickly go through this. This is some of the layers we look at. We own farms in this county in Wisconsin. We were thinking about expanding here. So Baptiste did this in about 10 minutes. We now know the precipitation here. We know the growing degree days in these other 3 counties. We know through the USDA, you can find out from maps, it's called the Cropland Data Area, you can see what every field grew in every year. So you know if it's potatoes or wheat just from these images that the USDA provides now. So we know where the concentration of soybeans and corn are. We know what the classification of the soil is, the texture of the soil. We know the size of the farms. We know the slope and the elevation. So we started concentrating, and now we own some farms in this area. That took 5 minutes to get all that information together now. But we have to still go out and evaluate it on get your boots on the ground. And this is northern Montana. Turns out that these things burn fuel much faster than wheels, and when you get to the end of a 10-mile farm and run out of fuel, you're in trouble. One of the things we do with productivity gains, this is maybe just for interest's sake, we have a relationship with Samco out of Ireland that does plastic mulch on corn. This is our unit. There's clay. We had a field day with this. So this might have potential when corn gets back to $7 or $8 a bushel. We were consistently getting like 25, 30 bushel more under the plastic than not under the plastic, depending on the year. But the economics of it at this point are not great when corn's $3 a bushel. This is a picture of one of our fields in Wisconsin where we were growing soybeans, 30 feet of soybeans, 30 feet of corn. That had plastic, and we had a comparison. We got about 28 bushel the acre more on the corn than a solid seeded field without the plastic. But protecting the soil resource is our main focus, and this is why our investors have gone with us, because we emphasize soil conservation whenever possible. So these are grassed-in waterway mats that protect the soil during erosion, or during wind and water situations. This is a farm we took over in Washington. That is the actual wheel track on the pivot that is 6 feet down, maybe 5 feet down. This is when we took over the farm. This is volcanic dust that has no structure at all. So you got to be really careful with this. It's very productive, but it's dust. So we started to use cover crops, eliminated tillage with the tenant we're working there, And this is the crop we have now. That's actually a field of seed sunflowers. And in 2 years, biology improved, and we're using half the irrigation passes with cover crops and reduced tillage. We did a lot of tile drainage in Wisconsin. We hired the biggest, best company, we were told, and we had a heck of a mess. Tile drainage, they do it, and then you don't see it again. And these guys supposedly were experts, but a lot of their inlets had a little bump here before it went into the drain. And if you're not there monitoring them, they can do a very poor job. And within a few months, your drains are plugged with mud because there's not a linear drop into the drain. So we consider tile drainage very important, but you have to be on top of them all the time, regardless of where you are, or it's not done properly. We do a lot of irrigation development on our farms in the Delta, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana. This is a farm that is being leveled for flood irrigation. In that region, they're taking pivots out now and going back to flood irrigation because of energy use, efficiency. They have the labor to do it, and yields are better. So we have an area where we're putting pivots, another area where we're taking pivots out and putting in flood. The cool thing about this is we're the first to use, or one of the first to use, a new technology that levels the field in little terraces, tiny little terraces. So instead of having a slope of like a fraction of a percent across the field, we have these little terraces. And that uses about half the soil movement and is better for flood irrigation. I don't know if it would have potential in the Red River Valley, but it's been working pretty cool for us in the Delta. This is the machines coming to our farm to do the leveling. Similar to stuff to what you see here, but this will be so they can grow rice, soybeans, corn, even wheat. These are irrigation development that we did in Montana. This is a picture of that. We put in 28 pivots on a farm that was mostly rangeland. And this is, a few weeks ago, I took this photo. This is Peppo, who I work with a lot. We're in Louisiana here. And this is the real estate agent and his son trying to persuade us that this is Class 1 soil. And this is very close to where they do the Duck Dynasty show. And we ran into some of the Duck Dynasty guys. And and this is how we connect with farms. It's through real estate agents, people we've met at conferences, just a lot of networking. So we bought this farm. That year, we leveled a bit of it in the spring, and these are 85 bushel acre soybeans. We were really happy we got this property. But the next farm, we kept the tenant here. He's 70 years old. His wife is 72. And then the next farm over that we bought came with a tenant as well. And the agent said, he's pretty old. I heard he was in the war. So I thought the Vietnam War, and I go to meet him, and as I'm getting to his place, there's a tree growing through the John Deere tractor in the front yard, and I go inside, and he was in the war all right. He was in World War II. He's 95 years old, and he's still renting. He's renting for 2017. He's 95 now. His son is in his late 60s, but he doesn't make any of the decisions or whatever. So we have young farmers, and then we have guys that fought in the war that farm with us too, so all extremes. This was just one of the many times we're in these back roads in the Delta. We were looking at this farm, and this is right in the middle of the property we were looking at. I'm walking through the mud, and it's the home of Johnny Cash, And I saw the home of Morgan Freeman and Jim Henson from the Muppets and Isaac Hayes, and there are these incredible shacks in the middle of nowhere in the Delta, and we're often running into these things. This farm was in the I'm telling little stories because I actually can't tell you everything that we do because it's kind of proprietary. And it's tough for me because as an extension agent, my job was to tell everybody everything I knew the moment I knew it. Now I got to be, discretionary, and I can't really do that. But I will tell you about this farm because this is in the Daniel Boone Forest of Kentucky. And we were going up into the forest with the real estate agent, and it is rural, and there is a large field full of dog houses with roosters on top of them. And I said, what's that about? And he says, well, that's a cockfighting farm. That's where they're raising the roosters for the cockfights. And I said, I thought that was illegal. And he says, well, it is illegal, but nobody comes up here anymore. There's a census guy that's still been missing for 2 years. I'm like, do we want to own a farm up here? And we found out that this was the highest yielding corn in the state of Kentucky. And so it was of interest. I found the previous owner, and he agreed to meet us at the McDonald's down at the interstate. We get down there, and he has the most incredible accent. I can't understand him at all. He's a young guy. And I said, what do you think of the farm? He says, it's pretty good. He gets a bit of water. He gets a bit of water on it sometime. I said, what's a bit of water? And he says, 20, 30 feet of water. And as we're sorting this out, it turns out every once in a while there's 20 or 30 feet of water on this farm because of flooding that occurs up in the Appalachians and comes down here and gets caught. So we passed on the farm because of the cockfights and the flooding and the meth lab that was burnt up in the middle of the property. But these are some of the things that we look at. So I'm going to quickly go through in the last 10 minutes here some of the ag tech investments that we are making. This is a company called Asilomar. My history has not been supportive of biological stuff. A lot of it turns out to be crap. And these two guys came into our office. It was just me and Eric one afternoon, PhD guys from Texas, but had taught at Oxford and Imperial College in England. And they had this hormone that they've synthesized that improves the fluid dynamics of a plant. And normally I would say, no, get lost. But they were so compelling, and they were willing to give us the stuff. So we built a greenhouse in our office. That ski gondola is our telephone booth, just so you know what's going on. We bought some plants at Home Depot and some corn plants from Berkeley. We sprayed them. We brought in people that were neutral, and sure enough, everything that got sprayed was visually different than everything that didn't get sprayed. So this is what it does. It improves the transpiration of a plant. So this is non-sprayed, sprayed, non-sprayed, sprayed, and yet can it help the plant extract much more water from the soil. This is a naturally occurring hormone that they've been able to synthesize and do things that are pretty amazing. So this is no treatment. This is where it takes more water from the soil, and therefore it has more available plant water. But even in irrigation, it's getting much higher yields because of the ability for the plant to transpire more. These are trials across the US and in South Africa, up to 40 bushel advantage over the last 2 years on corn. We had a trial at NDSU Minot, but it got hit by hail. Tried to get it into Canada, but it was not easy getting the product across the border, so we're concentrating here. And you see, it's not just University of Idaho, Kentucky, Colorado, Texas A&M, Illinois. These are the groups that are testing it, and it's working amazingly well. Wheat, it was in Colorado. We got a 15% increase on the wheat. We got a 20% increase on sorghum. And this is just one of the things that we're looking at. And one of the revolutions that's occurring in biologicals is the ability to move these large, organic molecules through a plant cell wall. All these things in the past were these big, complicated molecules that were inconsistent because they wouldn't pass into a plant very easily. Now there's technology, nanotechnology, polymer technology that's allowing that to happen, and that's part of this revolution that we're going to see over the next few years. This next thing that we've invested in is two young women, one from Vancouver, one from India, have developed a method to test all the biology in your soil in a very short period of time. You take your soil sample for your nitrogen and your nutrients, and you send it to them, and they send you clubroot, they send you viruses, they send you Sclerotinia, they can send you whatever you want because of a new method of evaluating the genetic material in that soil. This is the box you send them. This is that field where we were doing the flood irrigation leveling, and they were looking at biological activity in the soil. This is where the natural gas pipeline came close to the surface, and there was less biological activity. This is an example of one of their reports. This is all the bacteria they could find in this compost versus a healthy soil. This is the bacteria that fixes nitrogen, and just showed the comparison between the two. You would get a report on viruses, you get a report on any sort of biology in the field. This is an ag tech portfolio we've invested in called Planet Labs. They make tiny satellites that are taking a picture. They're just finishing the launch in the last few days of taking a picture of every square meter of the Earth every day. I've been to their facility in San Francisco. They make their satellites there. It's a very cool place. They have a launch center in their warehouse. that's got screens of Cape Canaveral and the launch places in Kazakhstan, and then it has a big screen with a skyline shot of Lethbridge, Alberta. And I'm like, I didn't know they launched from Lethbridge, and they said, no, we actually bought Rapid Eye, which was based in Lethbridge, which was the best inventory of images prior to their creation. And so this is a company that you can go on their website now, and you can buy an image for 5 minutes. Good. And so, in a way, it's kind of making drones obsolete. You can buy these images for pennies, daily images. They're not great resolution, but they will become much better in their resolution in the near future. This picture I put in for the benefit of the guy that's going to be talking about drones later. This was 2015, the halfway tree. You get smoke for 2 weeks, your satellite images aren't going to be so good, so you may still need a drone once in a while. We invested in a company that's making RTK systems for basically $50. The retail will be $500. They've been distracted from ag because the autonomous car industry is taking all their attention right now. The last one I'll mention is Impossible Foods. This is a phenomenal thing for everyone in the building here, because what they did was they took meat, deconstructed it, and then went and found the proteins and carbohydrates in the plant world. And then they reconstructed it to make it look and taste and experience exactly the same as meat. So the New York Times wrote a story on Sunday that he tasted it wasn't so good. I've tasted the blood that they made to put into the burger, and it tastes amazing. If you like blood, it tastes just like blood. But this is very scary in a way. It's not a very cheap way to make a hamburger, but it's not a tofu burger or a turkey burger. It is a burger made from the same stuff that comes from a cow, but they got it from plants. This is another shot of them. I haven't been able to taste one because they're so popular at the restaurant in San Francisco. You essentially get a lottery ticket, and if you win, you get to order the burger, the $20 burger at the end of the night. This is another company called Beyond Meat that's doing exactly the same thing. Tyson put a venture capital fund together, the big meat company, last month in December, and the first thing they invested in was in Beyond Meat, which is kind of interesting. Then this is a milk product from peas, done exactly the same way. They deconstructed it and then created the milk that tastes exactly like milk, but it's made from peas. And then we got maggots. Now, I had an investment company phone me a year ago, wanting us to put in quite a bit of money into a maggot farm for feeding chickens maggots. Now, you might remember that was talked about 30 years ago when I was at university, and I thought, this is not new technology. And maggots eating garbage, I don't know if we want to be a part of that. And a few weeks ago, he got his $25 million from people in San Francisco to create his maggot farm. And I thought, I go back to these lentil chips and all the things that are now considered bad, and now somebody's going to pay a premium for a chicken that's been fed maggots off of garbage, and somebody's going to pay a premium for that. That's just kind of the craziness of the situation. I'll skip through a couple of these. There's lots of canola down there. They don't know what they're doing yet, but it's part of some of the rotations. Tobacco. My last two slides. This picture is northern Montana going to the last farm we bought there. You go 15 miles on that road and you don't see anybody. And I get there, and it's a young couple. They're selling the farm. And the woman asked me to come into the house alone to see her new kitchen, which is not normal during the negotiation period. She takes me down to the basement and takes hold of both my arms, and she says, Scott, you have to buy this farm. I'm going crazy here. And I'm like, well, this is an interesting negotiation tactic. And I said, what's wrong? And she says, we're from Nebraska, and it's so far north here, there's no sunlight. And I'm literally going crazy. And I said, I'm actually from further north. And she goes, how do you live with yourself? This is incredible. So we did buy the farm. It is pretty good, but I put it in because it's kind of the perspective. You know, we have other people from other countries working with us, and we just bring a different perspective to what we're doing in the United States. And when you come from a different perspective, you see a lot of these opportunities that many people there are missing, and I think that's part of the reason I'm involved. The last picture is just something for you to keep in mind. San Francisco has a culture of naked people, and this is a big debate. And I was with my dad when I took this photo. Thank goodness I'm in Silicon Valley, so I knew how to Photoshop underwear onto them. But they walk around naked. It's a big debate. But one day I was going through the Castro with my pickup truck that has a Manitoba plate, and this naked guy was walking across in the crosswalk, and he points, Manitoba, oh, so cold. So I thought I was kind of happy that he knew where Manitoba was. So anyways, that covers it.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you at Manitoba Ag Days 2018 from January 16th to 18th.